So I'm Kathy Laird. I'm the director of the Human Rights Legal Support Center, and with me is Janina Fogels, who's one of our lawyers. We're going to try to make the human rights process clearer and accessible to you so that you understand if it's an option for you in dealing with what happened to you in the G20 events, if it's a possible legal avenue for you, if that's what you're looking for. It may be a good route for some of you and not for others, and we're happy to take questions. Sometimes it's hard to know in advance exactly what your specific issues and inquiries will be about, but we'll do the best we can in giving you an introduction, and then happy to take your questions after that. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to start with is to explain the human rights system itself. I think it will help if you understand that the Ontario's Human Rights Code is about equality rights, and it's about discrimination. So it's the right to be treated the same as everyone else and not differently based on grounds that are listed in the code. And the primary grounds are race-related, so race, color, ethnic origin, ancestry. And then another group of headings has to do with gender and sex, so gender, sexual orientation, sexual identity, pregnancy, breastfeeding, would all be captured there, or possibly under another group, family status and marital status, also age and disability. I think those, ancestry and citizenship. I think those are the main ones related to services, but I'll return to that. What isn't in the code is what you may know of as your charter rights. So freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly and belief, those things are not in Ontario's Human Rights Code. The right not to be arbitrarily detained, your arrest rights when you're criminally charged, and your rights against unreasonable search and seizure, those are in the Canadian Charter of Rights, and there's another process for that. I'm sure we'll be speaking of that more this afternoon. But those are not rights that are in the Human Rights Code. And so this avenue, this legal avenue, will not be a way for you to rely on those rights legally. So I just want to make that clear. So the piece of legislation that we're talking about is the Ontario Human Rights Code. Applications about equality rights go to a body called the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, and our organization, the Human Rights Legal Support Center, provides legal service to applicants, to people who believe they've experienced discrimination, who believe that their code rights have been infringed. We provide them with representation, first of all, legal advice, legal assistance, and representation. We can't represent everyone. We have about 150 new people call us every day. But we represent people at mediation and at adjudication. I think it will also help to know that the Human Rights Code protects your rights in specific areas. So most of our cases are about employment discrimination, but it also applies to housing and to services, and policing would come under services, and facilities, and so the detention center would be a facility. So the events that happened to you during the G20, and if you were in detention, would likely fall under the code as services, but the question is for you to think about is whether or not it can be caught within an equality rights or discrimination framework. Okay, I think I did already list the grounds. Just a couple of things. I've said that discrimination is about treating people the same way, but it can also, sometimes discrimination occurs even when someone is being treated the same way as everybody else. And I'll try to give you a relevant example of that. If a person has special needs that are related to a code ground, like special disability-related needs, perhaps age-related needs, a nursing mother might have special needs if they were caught in a kettling situation. They might have special needs to get released. Everyone wanted to be released, but they might have different needs. So the code is also about sometimes treating everyone the same isn't good enough. If you had special needs and you made those known to the police and they ignored you and didn't accommodate those needs, that's the concept of accommodation of special needs. If they didn't accommodate those needs, in other words, if they didn't respect your needs and deal with those needs, then that can be discrimination as well. And so there may be some people who have a human rights complaint that fits in that kind of a framework. Another big area that might have application here is harassment. So harassment is a form of discrimination, and the code recognizes harassment on any of the grounds: racial harassment, gender identity harassment, slurs. Harassment doesn't need to be, it can be just one incident. We can talk about poisoning a service environment. That almost seems not quite effective language for what happened during the G20. It was all a pretty poisonous situation. But for example, there's complicated questions about strip searches, and at what point would what happened to you in a strip search situation be a form of harassment? And we can talk about that. It's probably something that we could deal with in questions. So your rights against the police under the code are basically threefold: the right to be treated, not treated differently based on your race, your gender, your sexual identity, your age, your disability. The right to have any special needs recognized and accommodated. Those needs have to be identified, but if they are identified, it's incumbent upon the police to accommodate them. There's obviously a lot of decisions in case law about what is appropriate accommodation. That's the kind of detail that we'd have to deal with on a case-by-case basis, but a right to have your needs accommodated. And then thirdly, the right not to be subjected to harassment. If you feel that what happened to you falls in one of these three areas, you have the right to file an application at the tribunal. Janine and I haven't talked a lot about it. We might overlap a little bit, so I'll try to, I think I'll hand it over to her fairly soon. But you have the right to file an application, and there's no fee to do that. As you'll hear this afternoon, you have a number of choices of legal forum. When you think about whether this is the right forum, you need to think about whether there's a prohibited ground of discrimination involved, whether we do deal with cases involving the police regularly, and quite often it's about race. The reason I say that it's important to really focus on whether you fall within the code is because if you launch an application under the human rights process, and they could find that the police treated you very badly. They could find that you were beaten up. But if it isn't related to discrimination, then your application will be dismissed. So it's only the right forum for you if it's about discrimination. Otherwise, you'll want to consider other forms in order to get your needs considered and a remedy. And by remedy, we mean well, I think I'll leave that because you're going to go with remedy. Okay. And just the easiest case to make arising of the G20 event probably is with respect to disability-related issues. And so I'll just use that as a quick example. If you think that your medical and disability-related needs were identified and not met by the police, then the steps of having a successful case would be that you would need medical evidence to show that disability, and you would need to show that you brought this to the attention of the police, let's say in detention, that you asked for your needs to be addressed, and that you were denied that over a period of time. There would be a response time. So that's an example of what might be a relatively straightforward Human Rights Code case. In terms of the process, are you going to talk about that, Janina? Okay, so I'm just going to hand it over to Janina, and then and there's going to be an opportunity for questions after she speaks, and then, yeah.